presentation today, automation dependency. So without further ado, let me carry on there. A couple of definitions. The first one, automation, or automatic controllers used in various control systems, operating equipment such as an aircraft with minimal or reduced human intervention. In fact, at this stage, there is, it can do everything. The pilot actually just need to do the initial part of the takeoff, and afterwards everything else will be done by the aircraft. I don't think it's going to be long before the aircraft will actually do the takeoff. But now you can see if the aircraft is doing the takeoff for you, if it's climbing for you, if it's descending, it's intercepting and everything. It sort of leads to a couple of problems. Is it a good thing? Right from the beginning, I believe that automation is a good thing. There's a couple of things we have to understand before we actually carry on with that. All right, so some procedures have been completely automated. The biggest benefit, automation that saves labor. All right, saves energy, improves quality, accuracy, and precision. All right, so next time I'm sitting in the back of your transport aircraft, all the big guys there, I'm quite happy. Use those autopilots. All right, so don't think because I'm talking about that I'm against it. Not at all. I'm for it. Then dependency, say, or being dependent on, in the case of the flight automaton, could have a physical and psychological inference. In other words, they are, we can reference in both of those. To the physically dependent could stem from human design, such as muscle power, reactive time, and so on. But remember, there could be split attention. On the psychological front, it could mean that the person involved, in obviously this case the pilot, have become dependent on the auto functions as decision-making entities. That's a problem, because we get into our aircraft, we start flying, and it's an everyday occurrence where we use some form of automation. Now, whether that's your normal GPS to do some routing for you, well, most all aircraft now, and when they dolly the aircraft up, it's with the latest Garmin 1000s, and everybody makes sure that they will understand how to operate the electronics, and the electronics will actually take over all the functionality from the pilot. When it comes to the single operators or smaller aircraft, just to get to the audience, this is basically the same thing. The once airline industry capabilities are now at the fingertips of your normal private pilot. Just a little bit here to show the different kinds. Not a big deal. Advantages? All right, there's a lot of advantages, and I agree. It would be a long list to say here, you can do this and you can do this and the rest. There are so many advantages that it will be difficult to tell them all. But it's great. Sat in the cockpit the other day, and the aircraft can absolutely do everything. You just call up the flight plans, you call up the approach plates, you call up everything. The aircraft will put you on the ILS on final approach. Or let's get it down more to earth for the smaller aircraft guys, as we're using in the flight training schools. We've got autopilots as well, but then on the other hand, besides the autopilot, we've all got GPS. Now, whether the GPS is on your phone or in the aircraft, part of the aircraft equipment, or whether it's slapped on, or whatever the case might be, it's a form of automation, and we are using the automation. And that is the trouble. Are we actually capable of using the automation correctly? Do we understand how to check up on the automation? All right, so fundamentally, it's great. And then we need, obviously, to operate from there. Just say the use of automotive system is in itself, it is not a problem. That is not the problem. I absolutely believe that. But if you are totally dependent on it, and I've seen how many accidents that the guys will start to fly in bad weather, instrument flight conditions, night flying and stuff like that, where once the autopilot disengages, the pilot is just simply in trouble, and we've picked up many an aircraft on the ground because the pilot wasn't capable of actually flying instrument flying himself. Go and think about that. Now, no, but you know, I fly for the airline. All right, it's fantastic, and I'm very glad that you've got an autopilot system when you're in the airline. I'm going to be even more glad if I know that if that auto system somehow fails you, that you're not going to fail me as a passenger. All right. Just another pretty picture of a pretty cool aircraft and what the environment looked like. Auto dependency pitfalls. The first one, habit forming. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad habit, all right? If it keeps within the rules of engagement. So I say within the rules of engagement. And the very first question is do you know, have you been taught what is the rules of engagement when you use auto systems? And if you don't know, we'll go into that later on. How do you use autopilots? How do you use this? And for now, just remember, there is a protocol. There is checks that needs to be done. To come into the habit of the machine making the decisions. The machine making the decisions. Can you see the problem that I have here? The cognitive capability of the pilots, because it's just a push and go, now becomes really a problem. It says the habit of believing the machine, never mind what happens, seems to make no sense. If it makes no sense, no, don't worry, the aircraft is right. It takes thinking out of the game. And let me put this in red. It takes thinking out of the game. If your request therefore is not correct in relation to your desire, the result will not be what you do not necessarily desire. In order to overcome the habit of becoming the prime driver, a strict protocol is to be followed in planning, cross-checking, mental arithmetic. This is the thinking game. This is the game that we don't necessarily want to be in. It's so easy. Go to button. Go direct to. Follow this approach. We do the approach briefing. Are we really concentrating on the briefing? Have we got the capability? Are we able to take over from the autopilot at any time? It's just questions that I'm asking. Okay, dependency forming. Now, what does that mean? When you become totally dependent on an auto function to do the job that we're easily able to do, such as thinking, and here we're now going with the big ones. We're saying thinking, planning, decision making, basic flying, then you've lost the skill. If dependency forming has taken your motorized skills and your cognitive capabilities, in other words, the skills, the basic skills away, then we will read about the accidents in, well, the newspapers. And unfortunately, it's the big boys falling out of the sky. We have learned to become computer operators and system manipulators, but we have lost the capability of actually flying and thinking like a pilot. Again, not against the stuff. I'm absolutely for it. But I'm only for it if you can take over the function if the functionality is lost. Raw data flying. Can you still do it? No longer used to work out an approach. I don't have to. I don't have to work out lead downs. I don't have to look at safety sector altitudes and stuff like that. Oh, it's great. The computer is not going to make a mistake. That's the mistake. You're going to make the mistake. You're going to go to the wrong place. Maybe you should go to Golf Alpha Victor, but you've got in Golf Bravo Victor. It's quite a distance from each other. But if you don't pay attention to, and ain't got an idea where we're going, you're inside the trap. and you are trapped. So it does not mean that we must stop thinking. When our systems are, the pilot has now to dig very deep, and in cases cannot catch up fast enough to avoid disaster. Just another picture, and that's a Royvalk, not much there, but then you don't need much more than that. Lack of skills. And I'd say, here we go now, and we say, one of the big things is that we have lost our skills. What about the skills? I mean, to have skills and to have the license to perform a certain skill has become, in certain sectors, would be deemed as unnecessary. And we hear it all the time. Man, we're not going to have to train the co-pilots that long. We're going to do this. We're going to get them into the system. We're going to do that. And then, because we've got automated systems, we reckon that now we can save a lot of money by getting the drivers up in the front. All right. And I'll put that one on and see how long it's going to last for you. That will be forever great unless something goes wrong. And you know what? I don't have to say that. You know that. Stuff has gone horribly wrong. And then the crew just simply didn't know how to even recognize that they were in trouble, let alone to say how to recover from a troubled state. It's until the system fails or it has a glitch. It is still true that you will only last from a few seconds to around a minute without IF skills before you lose control or autopilot assistance. Wow, I cannot stop. Everybody is playing their computer games and they have not been taught how to do a proper T-scan. The T-scan in today's world is as valid as it was yesterday. That's the raw data flying capability that I'm talking about. Yeah, but you see, I'm a PPL and come! We'll show you how it works. You can do the training. But just to go out there and jump in and think that you're great by pushing an autopilot button or an auto function button. There's nothing cool about that. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Okay, now say you will never know your real skills unless you have been subjected to the real skills test. So what do we do in the simulator? We take away the auto functions from the pilot. There's two parts to the auto functionality test. The one is, if you use the autopilot, do you use the correct protocols? Do you have the correct calls? Do you do the correct cross-checks? And then the failures of the system starts. How do you pick it up and can you compensate? So this is what we do in a test. Why? Well, if you cannot handle it in a simulator, where a crash is not a big indaba, although we feel pretty bad if we do crash, but in the real world, it's a total different story, obviously. We always had the saying that we should just do the night rating in case we get there late. Okay? We just do this. However, we never say what will happen if we lose auto functioning regarding flying, machines in the crowd, navigation, destinations, and so on. What am I saying here? We do night flying just in case. I've heard the pilot say to me, I'm going to do an IF rating just in case. Are you going to do an pilot failure or auto functionality failure or navigation failure? It's all auto functions. Have you got a plan? Is it something that you've been taught? Have you got the knowledge? Have you skills? Or have you got an attitude that, nah, too much trouble? Sense of security. It doesn't automatically bring a sense of security to the flight planning and execution, but when having true capabilities, the same sense is false. In other words, we're talking about a false sense of security. The fatal combination is to venture where you yourself are not capable of. Use of auto functions can fail when you yourself are the backup and not you are yourself the backup. Not so? You are your own backup. It's terrible if you have to sit there and say, if I only. Whew, that normally comes way too late. How do we combat this? Well, very shortly, what we have to see here is auto-function interface. Know your equipment. Know your equipment. Know your equipment. You must know all the functionalities. And really, we're flying around with autopilots, we're flying around with GPSs, so many auto functions and systems, but we don't actually really know. To not fully know what one is using is a huge trap. Know your equipment through proper training, practice, and regular application. You know that I get annoyed when somebody says to me, oh, I taught myself how to fly aerobatics. And then you go on to explain how you nearly killed yourself and you work through it and everybody thinks you're a hero. You're not a hero, man. You're a... All right, also. I'm sorry, I mean, you're not. You want to tell me if we've got the training, somebody else has died to perfect the science, and you come and you want to redo what other people have done already? Now, how clever is that? I'm just asking, how clever do you think that is? Technical knowledge. We haven't got the knowledge. Do you know? If you don't know how the system works, how are you going to stop to ensure that the system is 100% functional? Little things. Whew, yeah, okay. That's a little bit of a, sorry for that. That's a little bit of a bad background that if you actually think of this in the background here, this is, the horizon is not what we wanted to see here in this case. All right. How do we combat? Cognitive skills, your ability to think. Our ability to think when we are facing adverse conditions. It's easy to sit in your wheelchair and to think on what would I have done. When you're in the dynamic environment of ever-changing, when there's a lot of pressure, emotions are starting to take place, and all that kind of stuff, then if you haven't been properly trained and you haven't got proper knowledge, I'm afraid you're going to freeze up. And that's the last thing that we can afford. And please, if you're my captain when I'm sitting in the back there, please don't freeze up. Be properly trained. Understand the limitations of the auto abilities as well as yourselves, and get over that. Motorized skills, automation has taken away much of the functional stuff, and I said that, and I know, if you're flying for a big airline, try and fly, you must, I think, fly something small. Do aerobatics, fly older birds, DC-3s, DC-4s, Yaks, Cessna 172s, anything where you've got, and yeah, go and fly the raw data stuff. Hey, I'm sitting on the side where sometimes I see the guys coming from very high posts and captains and airlines, and now they want to get their civilian, other civilian aircraft on their licenses and stuff like that. And then I see how terribly lost people can be in a functional world where automation has deprived them of capability. Sure, okay. Not everybody, but it's probably a better idea to do something about it. Okay, by selective flying, without auto functions, that can obviously go a long way. Processes and procedural knowledge, well, that goes without saying. Remember, automated functions are all programmed according to specific logic. If you know the logic, then you can anticipate. Otherwise, you're just a blind follower. You're a blind believer. Specific cross-checks, this is the part. One must, there must be very, very specific cross-checks. And if you look in the environment of the bigger machines, the Part 121, the airline guys, the charter guys, then you will hear that in the cockpit there's an absolute protocol on how to use automation, the cross-checks, the functioning, and the decision-making surrounding that. And then also the capability to notice that something is going wrong, coupled to the capability of then being able to do something. But we cannot have the capability of nil. Please don't lose that. Yeah, but I just press the go-to button. Yes, and you go to the wrong place, then go to what? There's so simple fundamentals to know where you're going. Does it make sense? I said I wanted to go I want to go to Waterkloof. Okay, I wouldn't want to go to Waterkloof, but you want to go to Waterkloof. And but this heading is not the right, the time, some things they're not right. How will you know something is not right if you do not have at least an idea what it should be? Then there's no comparison. And that's why we do planning. Planning is to give us certain expectations. So if you are spatially orientated, if you're procedurally orientated, if you are orientated in progressiveness of your flight plan, man, you're okay. Then you must just look at what you get versus what you expect. And from that, you can deduce and make very, very good decisions. That's a pretty picture. The only thing that why I put it up here is to say, you know, the amount of instruments on here is mind-boggling. I must actually confess, I love this glass cockpit thing. I grew up with the steam-driven stuff, okay, and I can use them nice and stuff like that. But man, there's nothing nicer than, well, to me, I love this kind of stuff. But anyway, spatial orientation. To fly any route without knowing the basic routes, I mean, you're immediately at a disadvantage. Route studying has changed through the years. Now, we used to flight planning, draw lines, circles, markers, give us all that kind of stuff. When you do electronic flight planning, it's the same deal. The computer will work. You don't have to punch in anything that it gives you the answer. It'll give you automatically. That's automated navigation backup. It's giving you, go to, sorts out everything. Fly this approach. It sorts out everything. Does that mean that we can now put zombies in front there? In other words, people that's void of the ability of thinking and reacting? Well, I don't know. Maybe 50 years in the future. But I doubt if that will be in my time. You must be au fait with the procedures. You must know. Now, single pilots do not always have ATC radar and other monitoring assistance. No, it is not. You're flying out there in cowboy country. All right? So, there's nobody to show you the way. And if you get lost in the way, that's when accidents can happen. And you know what? They do happen. Is it necessary that the accidents happen? Wow, that's probably a debate for the other day, but it is unnecessary accidents. but that they will happen under certain circumstances, that is unfortunately true. Remember that flying is a living game. Okay. That's what a cockpit should look like. All right, you fighter guys, don't worry about it. Don't worry, you fighter guys, that's where you're going to end up anyway. It's a beautiful cockpit. Chopper guys, okay, I'm not going to end up in that cockpit, but there's many other fancy stuff as well, and the chopper cockpit has become pretty much automated and sophisticated and all that kind of stuff. And even the bigger helicopters has got dials in the roof, guys, so it's still true. So conclusion, there's nothing wrong with auto functions in an aircraft. We mostly find that lack of knowledge, now I just want to make sure that we've got this one right. The lack of knowledge how to use the equipment, and secondly, not be able to function without the equipment. Auto feathering is great, but the ability to still recognize an engine failure and correct react is still better. Some systems will not be possible to manipulate manually, of course, but those are the ones without which we wouldn't have been operating anyway. So what's the bottom line? Automation. Look, there's still a lot to say about automation, and I just wanted to put this short clip in. It's about 20 minutes long. The point is that automation is great, but as great a tool as it is, it can be the greatest trap out there. You must know how the auto environment functions. You must have the skills to operate it. You must know the cockpit calls and the cross-references. You must always be vigilant lest the machine is dropping you, because you are the backup. So, what can I say? Well, that was a little bit about automation, and well, as you can see, it's got serious pitfalls, and I really want to encourage you to be capable and to really understand the equipment in your aircraft. Right, so next up, I've got something here from Thomas Honeyball, and he's going to just touch up with us on law issues. Okay, Thomas, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Uncle Charlie. Well, the idea is to every month just give a short insert about aviation regulations, and we've dubbed it officially aviation law lingo. Now, without any further ado, what I want to just touch on quickly in a few seconds tonight is part 93. Now, I know you guys are all looking at each other and saying, what the hell is part 93? Because that is something new that's come in. And that is to help cover some of the grey areas that we have in the regulation. So if we go there, I can just read that with you. First of all, it's the corporate operation. Now, what is a corporate operation? Corporate operation is, for very long, well, up to now, there's been a grey area that everyone is using to do charters. Because I'm flying for my company, and I'm flying my company around, or I'm flying with my business associates. So this part is specifically for that. And it's important to note that even though this part is now going to make it possible to under the regulations, fly for your company and with your business associations, and I'm going a little bit ahead of myself, but I just want to show you at the bottom here, it's done without remuneration or hire. The moment it is for remuneration, so if I'm receiving any forms of money, then it's charter. So there's no grey area. I can only fly under this part if there is no remuneration. Now let's just quickly look at what this part says. I'm just going to highlight a couple of things. First of all, who does it apply to? Let's just read at the top here, part 93.01.1. It's subject to the provisions of the sub-regulations. 2, this part shall apply. So who does it apply to? Operations of South African registered aeroplane used in corporate aviation if, and then there's a couple of things. So if it's turbine, pressurized, non-pressurized, if it is has a seating capacity more than 20 or less than 20, that's the next one there. And then the carriage of passengers is related to the conduct of business of the individual, so personal use, company, or corporation having ownership of the aeroplane, and the carriage of such persons is done without the remuneration of hire. And then at the bottom here we just says, who does it not apply to? So, very important those things. And then what I just want to quickly highlight is what is going to be required under this part. It's not just a regulation. I have to physically get approval. So I have to get, instead of a air operator certificate, I'm going to get a private operator certificate. So, and my private operator certificate is going to give me the permission, it's going to certify me to be able to do this or conduct this type of operation. So now there's a very clear line between what is Part 91 and what is business operation for myself and what is our charter. So just before we close here, I just want to quickly highlight a couple of things that is going to be required. First of all, you are going to be required to have a operations manual. Now the operations manual is not going to be, I had a quick look at the technical standards. It's a couple of basic things, your SOPs, how are you going to operate, how are you going to do your crew scheduling and so on. But you're going to have an operating manual, operations manual, and it must be approved. Okay? Like anything else in the law, this operations manual can only be more restrictive than the regulations, than the CA regulations. It won't be able to be less restrictive. So you won't be able to put in your operations manual that we do anything contrary to Part 93. So the next one here is you'll have to have a safety management system. And that doesn't just mean you have to have the safety management systems manual. You'll have to have the manual, but there will have to be regular hazard identifications, and then you need to provide proof that you actually conduct proper risk management. So that's the next one there. Operational flight planning and operational control. Operational control is something we can talk about for very long. We're not going to do that tonight, but that simply means you need to know exactly where your aircraft are at any given moment. So if CIA comes to you and says, ZSETL, where is she? You need to know who the pilot is, where she is. The flight following needs to be done in real time. And that doesn't necessarily have to be a tracker. You can have a WhatsApp group, but there needs to be control. The flight planning that happens needs to be handed into the office so that we have that in the office. Minimum equipment list. Again, we can talk on that for very long, but just simply, what is now required is if there is a FAA published, well, manufacturer published master minimum equipment list, CIA will request you to hand in or submit a minimum equipment list for your specific company. Now it can be an exact replica of the master minimum equipment list, but you have to have it submitted, and if you want to be more restrictive, then you can, but again, not less restrictive. And then the other ones, operations manual that you have already in your aircraft, that should already be approved. Fatigue management program, what they talk about there, I read it, it's just got to do with your crew and duty. Now Part 91 actually talks about crew and duty limitations and so on, so that is just going to be monitored carefully so that your pilots don't fly outside of their crew and duty. And then a training program, there you're going to need to provide proof that everyone that is involved in your little company that's now flying all the corporates around has received training on the manual, and they know what the procedures are. If we're doing flight following, that they've received the flight following training, so that we can, because, you know, without it, it's not a charter operation, but your exposure is exactly the same. So everyone needs to be trained, everyone needs to know what they are doing, at the different levels. And then the last one here is your pilots will also need to receive a proficiency check, and then based on the type of operation that you have, that will be a 6-month or a 12-month proficiency check. It's a little bit less restrictive than the charter operators, but this part is specifically to give a little bit more control. And then, just in a couple of seconds to end off here, you might ask, how are we going to get this accredited? Well, the same as a charter operator, there's that 5-POP process. So you've got to go to CAA, have a pre-application meeting with them, hand in official application, hand in your manual. They've got to approve it. They've got to come to your premises. They've got to do an inspection. So this is no Mickey Mouse thing. Although we don't have to go through to the Air Service Council, CAA is going to operate full control over your operation. That's all I have for you this week or this month. I will see you next time. Have a wonderful, blessed month.
Well, that's a wrap-up then, ladies and gentlemen. Now you know a little bit about the law. You've now seen how your aircraft can disappear in front of your eyes. You've seen how you can get lost and how we can save the day. Thank you to everybody, and until next time.